Please subscribe to the channel for more sci-fi HFY videos. The observatory dome flickered with artificial starlight as 63 students from 47 species huddled in their designated zones, scales and fur and chitin reflecting the cold institutional glow. Among them sat one human, compact and unremarkable in academy grays, fingers tracing the edge of a survival manual that none of the others bothered to read. The Quirix delegation whispered in ultrasonic frequencies, their crystalline bodies refracting disdain toward the primate who brought primitive tools to an era of quantum drives. Outside the reinforced windows, the twin moons of Threshold 9 cast violet shadows across forests no academy student had ever entered. Their curriculum designed for stellar navigation and diplomatic theory, not dirt and hunger. The alarms didn't sound. That was the first wrongness. Instead, the food synthesizers simply stopped humming at dawn cycle, their screens displaying nothing, no error codes, no explanations, just blank obsidian surfaces that reflected terrified faces. The climate controls continued, the lights still burned, but the supply shuttles never descended through the atmosphere. Communications arrays sent signals into void that swallowed them whole. The Crinter cadets, apex predators on their homeworld, paced with increasing agitation, their confidence eroding as their metabolism burned through stored energy. 3 days passed in mounting panic, the various species forming clusters by biochemistry, sharing dwindling ration bars smuggled from previous weeks, whispering theories of political collapse, or quarantine or test. The human whom they'd called scavenger in mocking tones during combat simulations, stood at the southern airlock, loading a pack with items that made no sense to watching eyes. Fiber rope twisted from bedding, a knife fashioned from sharpened hull plating, empty containers that once held cleaning solution. When Cathera, the Vosh champion whose people had mastered genetic engineering before humanity left its caves, demanded explanation, the human simply said, "Staying here means dying slow. Out there, I can die fast or eat." The airlock hissed open to alien humidity thick with spores and predator calls, and the human vanished into green darkness while the others watched, too civilized to follow, too proud to beg. The academy became a tomb of the living. By day 7, the Quirix had dimmed to cloudy gray, their photosynthetic processes failing without proper light spectrum supplements. The methane breathers isolated themselves in their wing, conserving atmosphere. Arguments erupted in 36 languages over the last protein bars, philosophical debates about sacrifice deteriorating into bared teeth and threatening postures. Cathera organized rationing with military precision, but you couldn't ration nothing. The younger students wept in frequencies that transcended species, their bodies cannibalizing muscle, their minds fracturing under pressure. Their evolutionary paths had never prepared them to face. Every night, someone stood watch at the southern airlock, though no one admitted they were waiting. The doors exploded inward on day 12, with a crash that sent students scattering, their weakened bodies struggling to flee or fight. But it was the human who stumbled through, covered in mud and something darker, dragging behind them an improvised sled, constructed from stripped panels and vine. The smell hit first, raw meat, blood. The unmistakable scent of death, and piled on that sled were carcasses of creatures the xenobiology texts had labeled as a void, apex predator, lethal, 6-legged ridge-crawlers with fangs still bared in final snarls, marsh serpents thick as torsos, their poison sacs carefully a juvenile skyhunter, its wingspan folded, enough meat to feed them all for days. The human collapsed against the wall, chest heaving, and said through cracked lips, "Eat first, questions after." Cooking instructions on the manual, page 47. The feast was savage and beautiful. Fires built from furniture burned in the central atrium, ventilation systems clearing smoke, while alien hands learned to rotate spits and test doneness. The Crinter, natural carnivores, wept openly as fat dripped onto their tongues, their bodies flooding with relief from starvation's edge. Even the herbivorous species found nutrients in bone marrow and organ meats, their desperation overriding dietary restrictions evolution had written into their cells. The humans sat apart initially, methodically cleaning wounds, bandaging gashes with strips of fabric, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd felt every second of those 12 days. Cathara approached with something that might have been respect in her triple-jointed gait, offering water purified through her own filtration organs, asking the question everyone needed answered: how? The human's voice was steady, despite exhaustion, and the gathered students listened as if their lives depended on these words, because they did. Pressure snares using hydraulic principles from the waste system. Deadfalls weighted with stone, triggered by vine tension. Pit traps disguised with local flora that collapse under weight thresholds. I tracked water sources, mapped territorial boundaries, learned feeding patterns by scat, analysis, and kill sites. Everything out there wants to survive. You just have to want it more. Be smarter. Think 3 moves ahead. The human's eyes, bloodshot and hard, swept across species that commanded starfleets and engineered planets. Your people conquered space. Mine conquered dirt first. Both skills matter. As if to punctuate the statement, the human pulled out 3 more traps from their pack, already reset and ready. Designs sketched on stolen paper with charcoal, mechanical poetry written in angles and tension. But survival brought new questions that gnawed worse than hunger. Why only life support? Why leave them communications arrays that sent signals nowhere? The human organized them with brutal efficiency, assigning roles based on capability rather than rank or species privilege. Quirix, on watch with their superior sensory range, Krinta as security, others to food processing or water collection from the Academy's rain catchers. They established shifts, protocols, a hierarchy of need over want. And every day, the human vanished back into the wilderness with a different student, teaching them to read broken branches and disturbed soil, to move quietly, to think like prey and predator simultaneously. Cathara learned to set snares with her precise manipulators. A young Vosh named Khalees discovered talent for tracking. Even the Quirix, dying days before, found purpose in observing patterns the human had missed. On day 19, they found the first camera. The human discovered it while expanding their trap perimeter, a device no bigger than a seed pod. Military grade, broadcasting on encrypted frequencies. They brought it back in cupped hands like a grenade, placing it on the central table where it blinked with mechanical indifference. Rage rippled through the assembly in chemical signals and ultrasonic shrieks and electromagnetic pulses of fury. Someone's watching. The Krinta security lead growled, his translator crackling. Someone cut us off, waited for us to break, to die, recording everything. The human's face showed no surprise, only grim confirmation. I found 3 more, same tech pattern. This wasn't abandonment, this was a test, or a hunt. Start thinking about which. The Academy transformed from tomb to fortress. They mapped every camera, left them functional to avoid alerting whoever watched, but moved with new paranoia, speaking in whispers and hand signals. The human taught them guerrilla tactics from Earth's bloody history, asymmetric warfare principles, how smaller forces defeat larger ones through terrain advantage and psychological warfare. They fortified entry points with traps that looked decorative, that seemed accidental. Bridges over the atrium became choke points. The chemistry lab yielded compounds that could burn, blind, or corrode on command. Even the youngest students learned to move in patrol patterns, to never be alone, to trust the peripheral vision of species gifted with 360-degree awareness. At night, the humans stood at the southern airlock, staring into darkness, and Cathara knew they were thinking about what came next. Day 23 brought revelation in the form of data. Killis, brilliant with pattern recognition, had been analyzing the camera placements, their sightlines, their broadcast intervals. Gathered in the darkened observatory, away from watching eyes, she projected her findings onto the dome's interior. The cameras focus on stress responses, on hierarchy collapse, on interspecies conflict. Medical-grade sensors. This isn't surveillance, it's research. Someone's studying what happens when we break. Her voice trembled with academic precision wrapped around visceral horror. The broadcasts go to a relay satellite in high orbit, probably hidden in the debris field. And based on power consumption, they've been here since before we arrived. We were selected. The human stood, movement causing all attention to shift like iron filings to a magnet. Then we give them a show. Make them think we're broken. Make them think the experiment succeeded. Make them come down here to collect their data, in the violet moonlight filtering through the dome. The human's grin was predatory, all teeth and calculation. Because every trap needs bait, and right now, we're it. But when they walk through those doors expecting broken students, the unspoken promise hung in recycled air. And 63 students from 47 species understood the fundamental. Truth, they'd survived by becoming something their homeworlds never needed them to be. They'd become dangerous. The performance lasted for days. They staged fights in view of cameras, elaborate theatrical productions of species blame and resource violence that never quite crossed into actual harm. The Quirix dimmed their luminescence. The Crinter moved with exaggerated lethargy. They stopped maintaining traps outside, let fires burn low, simulated despair so convincing that even they almost believed it. Meanwhile, in the blind spots they'd mapped, they armed themselves. The humans' traps were everywhere now, invisible masterpieces of physics and psychology, pressure plates disguised as structural elements, tripwires that seemed like debris, deadfalls suspended in ceiling spaces that looked like architecture. Every entry point became a killing field waiting for activation. Every corridor offered 3 ways to die. On day 27, the sensors detected descending craft, multiple signatures, military configuration, broadcasting no identification, landing with textbook precision in the academy's main courtyard. The students, positioned exactly where cameras would see them, huddled in the atrium with perfect theatrical desperation. Through the reinforced windows, they watched armored figures emerge. Unmarked armor but professional movements, carrying restraints and medical scanners, and weapons set to stun. 15 soldiers, maybe 20, moving in formation toward the main entrance. Cathara's hand found the human's shoulder in a gesture that transcended species, asking without words if this was truly happening. The human nodded once and whispered, "Wait for the sound." The first trap triggered as the soldiers breached the outer airlock. A simple deadfall that crashed down with enough force to crater composite armor, reducing point position to crumpled metal and biological stillness. The second and third followed in rapid succession. Crossfire from angles the soldiers hadn't checked, because who expects primitive spike traps in a stellar academy? Panic bloomed in their formation as they realized the prey had grown teeth. Students emerged from concealment like a multi-species nightmare. The Crinter using claws that evolution designed for dominance. The Quirix reflecting concentrated light through crystalline bodies into blinding beams. The Vosh deploying chemical compounds that made armor seals fail. And moving through it all, the human, not fighting directly but directing flow, calling positions, adjusting the battlefield like a conductor before an orchestra of controlled violence. The fight lasted 8 minutes. When silence fell, 11 soldiers lay unconscious or immobilized in traps. 4 had fled to their ship, and the students stood gasping, bleeding, alive and victorious in ways their entrance exams had never prepared them to be. The human moved immediately to the fallen soldiers, checking armor markings, accessing datapads with practiced efficiency that suggested this wasn't the first interrogation. Cathara watched as the human's face shifted from triumph to horror to cold rage, and when they looked up, everyone saw the truth before words gave it shape. There from the Council of Aligned Species, our own government. This was sanctioned. The implications crashed through the assembly like kinetic rounds. Their own leaders had orchestrated this nightmare, had tested them like laboratory specimens, had been willing to let them die for data about interspecies cohesion under extreme stress. The experimental ethics alone would destroy careers. But the casual cruelty suggested something worse, that this wasn't the first test, wouldn't be the last, that somewhere in council chambers and research facilities, their suffering had been reduced to acceptable variables. The human stood, looking at the unconscious soldiers, then at the students they'd survived alongside. "We record everything, every camera feed, every wound, every trap they walked into. We broadcast it on every frequency until someone with a conscience hears it. We survive not just the test, but the reveal, and we make sure this never happens again." But the human's eyes kept drifting to the courtyard, to the ship that hadn't lifted off, and something in that stillness felt wrong. Cathara felt it too, the predator instinct that whispered about wounded prey that doesn't run. "Why are they waiting?" she asked, and the human was already moving, pulling up security feeds, cycling through external cameras, searching for the answer they both feared. The screen flickered, showing the courtyard from multiple angles, and there it was, the ship's cargo bay opening slowly, deliberately, revealing not more soldiers but something else entirely, something massive. The viewport exploded inward with a roar that shook the Academy's foundation, and through the breach came a creature that shouldn't exist. Bioengineered nightmare wrapped in armor plates and surgical augmentation, standing 12 feet tall with weapons grafted to limb extensions. Behind it, 2 more, each a testament to what happened when warfare and genetics merged without ethical oversight. The escaped soldiers hadn't fled, they'd unleashed contingency. The human's voice cut through rising panic with absolute calm. Everyone to the observatory. Now move. As students scrambled toward the one defensible position, the human ran the opposite direction, toward the breach, toward certain death, carrying the last of their trap equipment. Cathera screamed a protest, but the human was already gone, disappearing into corridor darkness, and she understood with sick certainty that their survival had required one more lesson, one final demonstration of human instinct, not to run from the predator, but to become the trap it couldn't escape. The observatory doors sealed with magnetic locks as footsteps heavy, mechanical, accompanied by clicking sensors echoed through the academy below. The students watched through security feeds as the human moved through shadows, laying tripwires with hands that no longer shook, setting charges made from chemistry lab components, turning their fortress into something more final. The bioweapons advanced with terrible precision, scanning for heat signatures, for movement, for anything resembling prey, and the human let them come, drawing them deeper into corridors lined with carefully weakened supports, into junctions where compressed fuel waited for ignition, into the heart of a trap 3 weeks in the making. On the screen, the human looked up at the camera once, smiled with exhaustion and defiance, and something that might have been goodbye, and pressed the detonator. The academy shook as fire bloomed through its corridors, and the feed went dark.